So
You're speaking to the world in the camera.
Okay. All right, well, let's pray. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to be together, to share fellowship. Thank you, Father, that we can feast with you. We can feast during your feast. Father, that there is heavenly manna, Father, that we can partake of. I thank you for your servant, Eric. Thank you, Father, for leading him to this truth. Give him words to articulate your truth, Father. Give him eyes to see and ears to hear. We just pray that your blessing would be upon us and that your shalom would be upon us. In the name of your Son, Yahusha. Amen.
Amen.
Without further ado.
Chag Sameach. Hey, how about a shofar intro? That might be.
I can do that.
Fitting.
Oh, you have to get up.
There's rules?
The rules are you got to stay between these chairs because
That's you. Problem is, 5 out of every 6 times I blow this, it sounds like a dying animal.
You're getting better.
that was the one.
That one was coming healthy.
This is session 5. The word 5 in Hebrew happens to be chumash, het mem shin, as in the book called the Chumash, is the first 5 books of the Torah as one package. And if you look at the meaning of the word, it actually means to be armed and equipped, which is to say you're suited up in your gear. If you're going to say go play football, you've got your helmet and your pads and your cleats, or you got your shofar, and that was a pure tone of that. That technically is a weapon of war, and not only is a calling together, but actually a resonant voice. You know, there's a total off subject here, but I don't remember where it is offhand, but there's a verse that says, at the time of your gladness, at the time of your Shabbat, at the time of your festivals, at the time where we're doing the stuff he said to do, blow the shofar. And it will be a voice of remembrance that he hears. And then the next verse later says, and when the time comes, which will come, that your enemies are upon you, blow the shofar. So it's kind of like when our parents ask us to do something. I gave this story a while ago that if you're told to take out the trash, say you're a kid, and every time you do what your parents ask, you kind of go, take out the trash, do the dishes, make your bed, mow the lawn, wash the car, whatever it might be. And then one day you say, hey Dad, can we go fishing? No, I don't have time. And you go, he remembers, oh gosh, all the things that I asked him to do and he did, now he's asking me to do something. And that triggers this remembrance. So the blue thread in the zitziot, he said, look at the blue thread, and when you see it, you will remember that I told you to do certain things. And the blue zitziot, we might think, well, that's just decoration. And it's like, no, it's not decoration. There's something about looking at that blue thread that he decreed would trigger our memory. It's not just the law. It triggers our memory that we are in contract, covenant, a deal, balance scales. He said, you listen to me and I listen to you. You behave as I asked you to, and you place your heart where I asked you to, and reciprocally, my heart is with you, and I will do everything I said because you're doing everything I said. This balanced relationship. And so the shofar, the blowing of the shofar, is our voice to him saying, hey look, Abba, we're doing what you asked us to. third day of Sukkot, right? Isn't that fourth day? Yesterday was a free day, right? Fourth day. He didn't say we had to meet every day. He said there was a commanded gathering the first day and the last day. But this whole week is just a week of festivity. So there's no harm or foul, or there's no criticism to anybody who's not here. But I've found, back in the very beginning when I first started to observe these things, it's like, I've been accused of being a workaholic. That's an unfair accusation, I think, but I was working every day possible, and so I'd take off the first day and the last day and work the other days. And then I realized, gosh, all those guys are having fun and doing stuff and getting together, and rats, I just missed it. Another year and forever lost. Come from hundreds of miles away. I came from the other side of the country. Because it's a great thing to do. If you don't keep Sukkot, it's not like you're going to burn in hell. It's not about that. It's about, hey Abba, look, we're doing what you said to do. And so when our enemy is around and you blow that shofar, that's your voice on record. We've been talking about this thing of quantum physics, and the fact that because everything is designed with electrons and oscillation, frequency, resonance, it changes the universe. Just blowing that shofar did something, though we can't see it. We have no idea what. But if he says to blow the shofar at the times of our rejoicing, and at the times of our remembering, at the times that we have a cry, it does something. And even though physicists, even today, are just starting to figure out this thing they're calling the new physics, or the, as I said, the combination word matrix and energetics of Richard Bartlett's book, the idea that there's a somic and a noon. I don't know if we ever got this on film, but could you just turn it on that little banner? Just for what it's worth. Here, there's the in the silver, that's the somic. In the copper color, that's a noon. And the gold color, which are wings, is actually the paleo letter He, and this one's just flipped around the other side, which is the fifth letter of the alphabet, which are on letter in English E. So the two He's look kind of like wings, and this somic and noon is, the word spelled He, somic, noon, He is the word bush. The word spelled noon somic is banner, or that which is lifted up on a pole. Anyway, so that's what we're kind of discussing here. So we're going to talk about some words, just for what it's worth. The other day, Jesse and Sally were reading the Lord's Prayer, and we had filmed this, and we're going to do something of this sort later. These are the English words. I'm just doing this for recognition. I was looking this morning at the internet to try to get the words written down in the Paleo. There's different versions. So which is the truth? I looked at Nehemiah's wall, and there's quite a few different words that are on that copy. So you can't just say, oh, what is it? We're dealing with translations, and where people have reinterpreted, so phrasing is different, some words are different, and which one is the actual thing? I don't know. In fact, another one I looked up had almost all the words you were reading, but a couple words were not there. So anything we have in the New Testament pretty much is somebody's reinterpretation of from the Greek or the Latin or the Aramaic into English, and then back into Hebrew. That's called a reverse translation. And there's no guarantee that we have actually the literal as Yeshua spoke, as Yochanan spoke, as Kepha, Peter spoke. We're doing the best we can. So again, this isn't a criminal act if we have the wrong words. It's the intent. It's what's in it. And why I'm saying that is because somic is an engineered structure like the shape of a letter, the spelling of a word. Noon is this spark of life that jumps out, so it's this consciousness, it's this intent, it's this heart. And each letter is actually, as drawn, is a combination of a engineered shape with a consciousness, an intent, Sally was so eloquently, beautifully describing it the other day. I believe we have that on film, where it's from, it's as if the inner you is this filament, this tungsten filament in a light bulb, and what's expressed is the glow coming out of it. And so how pure, how close to the truth is that filament that's within us. And if we choose life, if we choose to align with Yahuwah, if we choose to regard His Torah, if we choose to have an amiable intent, and then if we choose to do with a care for our neighbor as itself this expression of our walking with Him. I don't know if you noticed, but I just went through the Mishkan pattern. That's the practical application of doing this. We choose life. That's a conscious choice. And then we choose to regard His instructions. That's the barbecue grill. Big white fence is choosing life. Barbecue grill. Choose to say, what did He say? So we have to choose to have that orientation. What did He say? And then we choose to have a good attitude about what He said, even if it's confusing, even if there's disagreement, even if we got different calendars, or even if we don't know if the planet is shaped like a football or a pterodactyl, or whether it's a pizza or a sphere, or whether it's a whatever. If we don't know, we still choose to have a heart for what He said as we ponder, as we mull. Remember, Miriam pondered these matters in her heart, even though she had a genuine angel visit. And she had the genuine virgin birth, Betula. But she still pondered these things in her heart. That's a picture of the Memnoon. There's this structure, this path, following the Moedim. Passover, choose life, be this people. Unleavened bread, matzah. Find out how to do what He said. Read the Torah. I'm going through the pattern again here. Choose life. Search out the instructions, which is an intellectual process. The word lamed means teach and learn, and also rehearse, so you go over it and over it. Memnoon is pondering, mulling, like steeping tea. Nurturing these things over in your heart lines up with Shavuot, which is 50 days of counting, which is a gestation, incubation period of pregnancy, and then the birth, noon jumping out, the number 50, which is the Jubilee. This is the fruition. So noon is drawn as a sprout. Some ways of drawing the letter noon is a dot with a little root sprout coming out, or this lightning bolt shape with this jumping spring action. Modern letter noon is like that, or like that, noon sofit, but just for what it's worth. The point is, as we choose life, read His instructions, nurture it within us, then the Samik is, like the menorah, He will place us in the opportunity to actually do what He said. It's not just theory. It's not just believe, it's do. Do what He said. Like one of the arms of the menorah in the book of Revelation, Yeshua is walking amongst the candlesticks. Well, does that mean there's a whole bunch of candlesticks? People have done music videos where you see a whole field of candlesticks. It's kind of an interesting visual. But is that what He was doing? Or was He at one menorah with 7 branches? See, when you translate it into English, something is lost. You don't know what the original thing was. But I can imagine that Yeshua was standing with the menorah, because on a menorah, each branch, there's 6 branches, and then the one in the middle is just called the menorah, but there's 7 branches. And in Exodus 25, it says on each of the 6 branches, there's 3, what the word is either cup or bowl. It's the same word. So if there's 3 cups on each one of these branches, it's drawn as they were knobs. But is that what it was? Was there 3 knobs on each branch? Or is there a little triplet of cups, but there was 4 in the middle? If there was a cups. Well, what do you put in the cups? The cups is where you put the oil. So my thinking is that maybe every branch had 3 cups, which had 3 wicks with oil. And so when you're trimming the wick, you're not snuffing out one of the branches. I had an old brass lantern one time that had 2 wicks, and it was brighter, had only 1 reflector. And so he said have 1 reflector behind them, pointing the light forward. You never see a menorah shaped that way, but read Exodus 25. So if there was 3 cups with oil in each of the 6 and 4 in the middle, that's a total of 22 lights. There happens to be 22 letters of the alphabet. So I believe that the menorah is a picture of these alphabetic letters illuminated. There's something about studying the alphabet which is illuminating from within. And so, as we were saying, that you have this inner regard of his words. See, each one of these pieces of the Mishkan pattern plays into the next. You choose life. You learn his instructions. Take those instructions as the seed of the word planted in your heart. There's no verse in the entire Bible that tells you to ask Jesus into your heart. It just doesn't exist. It's not, if you ask Jesus in your heart, you get to go to heaven. That verse doesn't exist. Now, I believe it's the book of Revelation where Yeshua has said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." This is a metaphorical kind of parable picture. If any man opens, and I will come in and sup with him. You say, oh, well, that must be the door of your heart. I mean, unless you hear a knock on the door and there's some theophany, angelic visitation or something. But that's the closest verse to asking Jesus into your heart. Except for this concept that the Torah is the letters Kaf and Lamed. Kaf is like these lines, which are like a hand print, like furrows in a field that you've plowed. And Lamed is like this hoe that you plow, and you plant the seed, and the word kal means all. The word spelled backwards, Lamed Kaf, means to you or for you. Here, this is yours. And it's basically line after line, back and forth. Tend the garden. The word Lamed means repeat. Teach and learn and repeat, and teach and learn and repeat. You keep going over it. That blazes a path in your mind with neural synapses. That's a biological reality of the way organic beings are made. It's the geometry, it's the structure, it's the engineered structure of the psalmic. And then the noon, the spark of consciousness, the life, is the way we choose to tend and nurture. Remember, mem noon goes together, so kaf lamed is where the seed is planted, and then mem noon, even as a word, means mana, or where, or what is this worth? Where did this come from, or what? It means to count, to consider, to ponder it. So this is the interior, this is the intellectual, this is the, you might say, the heart. And then the word oseh, like an oseh fele, is ayin shin hey, lining up with the menorah, the letter psalmic, where, as in the book of Revelations, there was these candlesticks, and they represented the kahalim, the assemblies. Whether or not there's churches, that's a different language translation and a different matter. But the point is, there's these assemblies, and then Yeshua sits there and berates them for their behavior, not bearing the fruit that they had been entrusted with. He gives each one of the 7 churches, the 7 assemblies in the book of Revelation, the first few chapters, he says something they did right, something they did wrong, big trouble that they're in, or one church he had favor for. There's a certain word in the 10 Commandments spelled Pei Kuf Dalet. This letter P, or it's pronounced as P or PH. This is the letter Q, and that's D. Pei Kuf Dalet. It's the word for visit. But it's also the word to inspect and to be held accountable. Accountable for that which you were entrusted with. So in other words, he gives, whether it's information or position, opportunity, and then he tells us to do something, And he says, I'm going to come back and visit you. So this word, pachad or fachad, in the Ten Commandments, he says, visiting the iniquity of the forefathers unto the children to the third and fourth generation. There's the generational curse that Yahweh's putting on his people. He entrusted something to us, and if we misrepresent it, or fail to regard it, or fail to teach it properly, he's going to hold us accountable. So, the position of this menorah is he places, there's this other word amad, which is standing, ayin mem dalet. Just like the branches are placed, like a tree, grow where you're planted. Like a flower, where the seed happens to fall and you happen to sprout, bloom. Just stand there and bloom. And so it's the way you bloom, the way you produce your fruit, is an expression of what you chose to take to heart because of what you chose to learn. And that's where, as we were talking last night, if you allow, who was it that was talking about Tiffany? Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Because what you pull in to plant in that soil is what's going to affect what's in the heart and how you water it, which is going to affect the bloom, the fruition. And the next letter that lines up is the ayin, which is drawn as a fruit, which is drawn as an eyeball, which has to do with the scales of balance, where he said, now remember, all this bearing of fruit isn't only for him to look at his garden and be pleased with it, but it's because what he said to do was love our neighbor. And it's that way, and everything that we do regarding our neighbor, the word for neighbor is resh ayin. As we discussed, you were asking about the word for evil, right? Wasn't that you? No, that was somebody else. Okay, anyway, the point is, the same word for neighbor and friend and associate is also evil, harm, and calamity. And also to think and have intention. So it's the intention that we have regarding what we do to our neighbor is what makes something evil or good. The word itself, evil, isn't even evil necessarily. What I'm saying is that the fruit we bear is what is either evil or good because of our intention. And so if we think to do what was in our heart because of what he said, because like the big white fence of Het Tet Yod, we entered into his kingdom and choose life. There's the fence, the Briskan pattern. It's all about having an eye for our neighbor. Remember, Yeshua said the measure you use is measured to you. Blessed are the merciful, balanced scales, because they will receive mercy. What you do to one another is the thing coming back. And then the next letter that's set in front of us, which is the pei, which is the mouth, which means to open, but it lines up with the altar of incense, which is prayers, which is speaking, which is verbalizing, which is either commanding something to occur, like Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh heal you, or requesting from him. It's the open mouth. As I mentioned earlier, I was reading this book by Rabbi Nachman, and he said, he gave other nations certain powers and prestiges. Like look at the animals. The giraffe got the long neck. The ant's got this incredible strength. The bee carries his weapon right there, and you mess with him, wham, you've got it. I mean, some animals are fast, some animals are big, but to humans, he gave words. That's our thing, words. He entrusted us, empowered us, and he's going to hold us accountable, as he said, for everything we say. And even for the things we think. What do we do with our thoughts? If you can't control your thoughts, you can control what you do with your thoughts once you've had them, and it's like, gosh. Every level, he's going to hold us, fachad, responsible. And a play on English words, if we are found lacking, we're going to be fachaded. You can figure out the semantics of that.
Some translations say, and man became a speaking being.
Man became a speaking being. he speaks from the depth of his heart, and that what's in the depth of his heart is the Mem Nun. So as Sally was saying, that if we picture ourselves as a human flesh organism, if we picture ourselves as some kind of machine, but if we picture ourselves as a light bulb, if you have the wrong phase of electricity coming in, the light's not going to work. Depending on how we see the reality of the world that he created is going to affect how we conduct our lives. If we see ourselves as powerful entities, oh no, I'm just a scum, I'm just a worm, a wretch like me, like the Amazing Grace song. Well, that's true in a certain extent, but it's not true in another extent. When even Yeshua said, did I not say, or does the Torah not say, you are Elohim? It's like, people are gods. No, that's cult thinking. That's some new age. It's like, it's in the scripture. The question is, what does it mean? And how do we conduct ourselves? If we actually believed that the words we say could have an effect, we might govern what we say differently. But according to this whole quantum physics thing, our voice projects effect to cellular activity, to nature, to Elohim's personal attitude. Our voices can have an effect on him. There's a verse that says, Yahweh says, I'm listening, I heard what you said. He heard what we said. Gosh, I thought I was just muttering under my breath. Sarah laughed, and the Melech that was there and says, what are you laughing about? I mean, he's like, oh, I didn't laugh. He hears because this other study we did at Shavuot in Ohio, if you look on the website of the erictheology.net, you'll see some of the talks we did there just in 2018. I mentioned earlier in the class, if you write something on a piece of tape and put it on a glass of water, it changes the molecular structure according to some people's research. If you think certain thoughts, it's registered on some sort of mechanical equipment miles away. Our words, and even where we look, as we discussed earlier, our eyeballs don't just receive information, they project energy. That's the only way to say it, even though that may not be true exactly. But somehow, imagine if you were like Superman and your eyes had X-ray vision and wherever you look. Or like Godzilla or something where your eyeballs are shooting out laser beams, causing destruction. But imagine if your eyeballs are like a watering hose. That wherever you chose to look, you're nourishing because you're projecting out refreshment. All those things seem to be what's really going on. And so the people who are doing research, present tense, 2018 here, in this field of energy plus structure, Nun plus Samic, they're finding calculatable results that you can reproduce. That's science. This isn't occult. This isn't sorcery. This is physics. Just nobody knew what to do with it before. So they put it in this classification of don't look at it, and here we are looking at it. So what does that all have to do with this? This is Exodus 3:1. As I was trying to say before, even with the Ten Commandments, what we're reading in the text is not necessarily what it really says. For all intents and purposes, I've even heard people say that the Torah that we have written in modern Hebrew is not necessarily accurate. And it's like, okay, if it's not necessarily accurate, there's nothing we can do about it. But my premise is, if you know the 22 letters, you know it all. And it doesn't matter whether we have the way the words are exactly written, because they can't defy or deny the message in the 22 original letters in their, you might say, native or organic sequence of Aleph through Tav, which David locked down in Psalm 119, was reiterated by Solomon in Proverbs 31, the Isha Chayil, the Proverbs 31, woman. And there's other places, which I can show you even in Exodus 3. We'll have to do that another day. But the point is, what I'm saying is this pattern of the 22 letters is locked in. So you go to the internet and people say, oh, it's not true, there was more letters, there was less letters, there's other alphabets, blah, blah. The Aramaic, or somebody in Jordan was saying, oh, theirs is the primary language. We're not even going to debate that. I could debate it, I could talk to you about it if you want, but we don't have time. We're just going to assume, for the matter, for now, that this is the original language. So, if you go back and you take the modern English, how do you know you've got the right translation? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. What came out of Latin, which came out of Greek, which came out of Hebrew, which came out of Phoenician, but Phoenician is really Paleo-Hebrew because it's actually the Edenic language, Isaac Moseson's study. He hates the Paleo, by the way, but I promote his work, his study, his mind, his genius. Isaac Moseson, Origin of Speeches, great book. Also did a book called The Word. He just doesn't see this in the Paleo, but that's his choice, or his upbringing. The point is, just because somebody sees this or doesn't see it, doesn't qualify whether this is right or wrong. So if you know what the letters mean, then you can look at the words, and if you use the dictionary, again, I don't have it here, the Ernest Cline's Red Dictionary, it's quite helpful. So let's just look at this word to start with. Hasna, hesne, the bush. I could say, do you know what this letter hey means? Well, if it's in the first part of a word, it generally means the. But that's if it's a prefix. So does this mean the bush, or is the word bush spelled hey samic nun hey? The point is, some words begin with the letter hey, and it's not the word the. Not necessarily the word the. So how do you find the value of that letter? Because it's the fifth letter, chumash, of the Aleph-Bet, which means it gets its identity based on the precursive Aleph-Bet Gimel Dalet first. So to really know what Hey means, you got to know from the very beginning what is an Aleph. So we talked about Aleph being like this arrowhead shape, or an ox head. That's the way it's drawn in some ancient petroglyphs. And it's to set something in motion. That's the Aleph. The Bet is shaped kind of like this embryo shape. It's also, if you're a football player, you grab the ball in one hand and you got a straight arm off the other, so you're holding, protecting, and you're offending and pushing away, so it's a defense and an offense. It's a picture of your own mind tucked in, internal, and outreach with your arm to external, kind of the studies of psychology and sociology, you could say, the inner space, the outer. That's all wrapped up in this shape, and it's also a picture of this tent where you've got this tucked in place, which was, from what I understand, called my father's house. So you have this vestibule here of open to society, but then you tuck around the corner, and that's the intimate personal space. The brain develops first, then the eyeball, and then the spinal column, and then the arms and legs off the embryonic shape. That's Bet. Gimel, the letter, the head and neck of a camel, the letter with a foot. Modern letter. And it's the verb in action. It's the body, so Bet would be noun. And in motion, the Gimel, that's camel, which is verb. So Aleph, you might say, is intent. So here's a little story. I was mentioning to Charlie the other day. If you, just a way to remember, if you say, I need to go to the store and get something. That's the idea, that's the Aleph. So you say, well, the store's a long way away, I'm going to have to get in the car. So you need a vehicle, an object. That's the Bet. And then you start the car up, and you start moving. That's the Gimel. But then you say, well, if you're moving, you got to decide which way to go. You make a decision. Well, that's the Dalet. That's a door. You know, it's like you come to an intersection, and you go to the right or to the left. And so if you have a decision to make, and somebody says, oh, this is the way, this is the direction, well, that's the Hey. It's to specify which direction or which thing to now regard. The next letter in the alphabetic sequence is a vav, which is a nail, which is a connection. So the hey is just a suggestion. The vav is to say, oh, okay, now contact, engage, put it in the gear, actually turn the wheel like this. And then when you get to the store, Zion, it means cut off, which is to stop. So you're only going until you reach a certain place, and then you stop, you cut it off. And then het is this big fenced enclosure. Well, that's like the store. So now you enter the place of your destination out of the bet, and you get your shopping basket, the tet, the big round basket, and when it's full, there's a little tav inside the basket, means it's filled to the, so number 9, tet, is literally a full basket, and yod, this hand that grabs, yod as a suffix means my. How do you get what you put in the basket to be your own? You pay for it. Once you pay for it, it's yours. So I can now read these letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion, Het, Tet, Yod, as how do you go from this state to owning something? And then I can say, oh, as we said the other day, oh, this is Yahweh, this is the Elohim, this is Almighty saying, I who built the universe am going to somehow, and this is the mystery we were discussing last night, somehow that being put himself or some aspect of himself that we don't know, that we can't describe, that we hear different theories about, but because Aleph is self-referential. Is it his son? Is it his arm? Is it the Father himself? Our brains were not built to fathom and accurately describe how that happened. Because Bereshit starts with the letter Bet. Once it's in the form, now our minds can go, oh yeah. And we can look at Aleph and say there was an intent, but he never told us how Aleph becomes Bet. He never gave us the description of this event. All we know is Aleph represents, hey, well, here's the world, Bet. Well, he's the guy that made it. Aleph is the guy that made it. So by inference, there's an Aleph. And if somebody says, there is no God, the world didn't get here by somebody making it. It's like, how do you know? All you can see is here it is. All we know, our consciousness starts at the Bet. The Aleph is the silent letter. His reality is inferred by, you could say extrapolation. You could say, it's here, so somebody put it here. And even in this movie, Expelled, Ben Stein finally tracks down Richard Dawkins, the world's arch atheist, and he gets him to admit, how'd this planet get here? Well, somebody put it here. Maybe it was a space alien. It's just not God. This guy they call God is a space alien. He's somebody who's not from here that has the power to put this here. Whether you call him God or a space alien or whatever, it's the same action. And in the very end of that movie where they show that, it's like, gosh, these guys arguing about the meaning of words, and yet it's the exact same argument that even the guy that hates it has to admit to. There's no denying it. This place is here because it was put here by some powerful entity, regardless of what you call him. And the point of this Aleph Bet is that the Aleph Bet is his personal disclosure of his identity. That's the amazing thing about the Aleph Bet, is that we don't know who put the bet here, but if you read the Aleph Bet, and if Aleph means I am and I will, this is me, then he gave us these 22 letters as his introduction. This is me, this is who I am, I'm the guy who, and we call him Yahweh, but Yahweh is just some random 4 letters. The 10th letter Yod, the 5th letter Hey, the 6th letter Vav, and then another 5th letter Hey, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. That's the guy. But if it wasn't for the Aleph Bet, we couldn't assign a value to those letters to know that it's anything more than a phonetic sound bite. But it is the word Yahweh, or Ehyeh, 2 different words, in Exodus 3, where it's disclosed and declared and made evident. We know what those words mean because in the ordinal sequence of the alphabet letters, they mean where they're placed. So if you know where the letters are placed, you can tell what it means And we can take that meaning and plug it in. So if I say this word simply means the, it also means what this fifth letter in the sequence is trying to declare. It's information of revelation, declaration, shining a light, making evident. So even the word evident starts with the letter E, which is in English is that letter, flip the other direction. But the point is, it's the same as this letter, which is to be expressed. So I could say, this expression follows that intention, and so this expression is following this intention. So Hasanah is all about the Psalmic noon. The point is this. This word ash, which is fire, again, you can only know what that really means. I can say, oh, the word ash means fire. And even in English, this word ash is the decomposed residue after the fire has burnt. If I say Aleph is the intent, but this is the intent from the very beginning on the other side of anything we can evidence. This is his master plan as he strategized, as he had a passionate desire for, which can't even be expressed other than the fact that it has to be deduced or surmised by everything we see in creation. So this letter Bet is the creation as it's manifest. And the Aleph is his plan, his purpose, the powerful capacity and capability that he had to actually put his intention into being in the physical world, even though it's composed of the alphabetic letters, which are information, which is going back to the string theory, which are not matter. They're just energy of information. How did he do that? He doesn't tell us how he did it. He just did it. That's the not telling us how, is this little space here. So the point is, if you look at the letter Shin and realize that on the one hand it's the monogram of El Shaddai, it's the one letter that they write on mezuzahs, symbolizing who that is. Abraham knew the Lord, he knew Hashem, he knew Adonai, he knew Yahweh. It says, as El Shaddai, Melchizedek referred to him as El Elyon, which is the Most High. El Shaddai means Almighty, so there are these different names, but in the name is an understanding, a regard. If somebody says God, they mean the big guy who made this place, the one who's in some type of control. If you're a deist, well, he's in control, he has capacity, but he doesn't necessarily engage. So if you say, do you believe in God? Yeah, but what does he do? You can use all these different titles, Hashem, Adonai, God, Lord. Who is he? In Exodus 3, other verses, he says, I'm the Elohim. I'm the Elohim, speaking Hebrew. And I've heard people say, we don't speak Hebrew. We have to speak to our mind. And it's like, you're right. He scrambled the languages. But in Zephaniah 3:9, he said he's going to restore a pure tongue. The pure tongue, wherein is contained all the information that he intended from the beginning. Anything you want to know is in that tongue because it's what he put into. Bet is a container. He put the entire alphabet into the bet. So the bet itself is the alphabet. Besides it's the cosmos. Besides it's the human being. The point is, if he loaded it up in its pure form of expression, that's the identity of El Shaddai. Understanding that El Shaddai the Almighty wants to have a relationship and planned and designed and implemented the relationship known as the Brit, the covenant, between himself and a very particular people called Israel. That he said, you will be to me the most favored of all the peoples. You are my treasure. You are my heritage. You are everything I have. Focused attention right on you. That's Israel. And coming with that is the curse, which has been upon us for nearly 3,000 years. And coming with that is also the blessing which we look forward to for the sake of returning to his word. But all that's wrapped up. That concept is wrapped up in what that letter Shin means. So for Moshe to be drawn out. That's what the word Moshe means. It's not just his name. So Mem here is the word water, and Shin is the picture of teeth and fire, that which consumes. And Hey is this expression, this revelation. One way to read Moshe is to simply take those letters at the value which they hold in the original alphabetic sequence. I'm trying to explain here the reason, the benefit, why engage in the task of learning the alphabet, knowing the letter sequence, understanding the letter meanings themselves, like Aleph means ox, Bet means house, Gimel means camel, but also if you see the pictograph in the Paleo-Hebrew, the letters are self-expressive, self-referential. So I could say water, fire, light. What do you do with that? And right there, a bunch of people on the internet have said, that's it, I'm done, I can't handle this, there's too many different meanings, I'm out of here, it's all biddle gobbledygook. Really? Okay, see you later. Now, for everybody else who's still here, Sally, sorry to call on you here, but how would you read Vav Mem Shid Hey? It's neither right nor wrong. It's just how she would read. And I'm picking on her because part of what we've been doing these last few days is going over and over and over this type of thing. And this is just an example for whoever wants to watch and wants to regard some random person. And you've only been looking at this stuff for about a year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you see in that sequence of letters?
The connection.
Vav is a connector, it's called a nail, but a nail holds two things together, which is also like a bridge. You can even have a relationship with somebody. An invisible object, a relationship, and that's a Vav, that's a connection. Okay, sorry, go on, I'm just...
Incubation or incubated.
Incubated in a womb, like a fish lives in water, like a baby is born and gestated in a womb and then is birthed out in noon. So you have Mem Nun, taking it to heart, where it's just nurtured and fed and developing. Okay, so.
So, and then for Sheen, purified or pristine, pure.
So when she says purified, pristine, pure, that's the byproduct or the after effect of the refiner's fire. So somebody could look at Sheen and say, well, that's the chomping, biting teeth. Or before the teeth bite you, it's the scary threat of the teeth. So here in looking at the Sheen, it's the scary threat of teeth. It's the chomping action of the teeth. One of the meanings is an animal that's been ripped apart by teeth, having been chewed up by some other carnivore. You're not supposed to eat. It's ritually unfit. And then here now she's saying, no, it's the action of that which has already been refined. You know, we were discussing last night, you take gold or silver, you put it has dross, it has corrosion, corruption, you put it in the refining fire, and all that is burned off, and what you're left with is valuable, pristine, pure gold. And so when she looks at that letter, that's where her mind goes. Frank Seekins, looking at the word shalom, he says, destroying, Sheen, Lamed, the authority, Vav, that establishes, Mem, chaos. Destroy the authority that establishes chaos. Oh, there's what shalom is. Does that work? Kick the devil out and you got peace. That's what he's basically saying. But there's a different way to read it. A different way to read it. That's what we're talking about. So, now, could you pull together what you said without my interruption?
On display or revealed. So the connection of incubation working for purified, pristineness on display.
That's cool.
Can you, okay,
That makes-
okay, you Lena, you look like you got it. What did you get? Can you put it in your words, what she just said? Sorry.
Well, I guess that Moses was the result of the purifying fire. That's how he got to be who he was.
Okay, what she's saying is Moshe became who he was because of a purifying fire. Okay, we're going to take that and run with it here. Now, here's the thing. Moshe was standing looking at the bush. He wasn't in the bush, so he wasn't getting purified. So whatever you're talking about had to happen before that event. What happened to Moshe before Exodus 3, the burning bush incident, which we could assume or consider a refiner's fire? What happened? Oh, I'm still talking to you. Sorry. Okay, I'll pull you off the spot. Charlie, what do you got?
He was in prison, or do I have the timeline wrong?
Moshe, I don't recall, was ever in prison. He was the guy who threw people into prison. He was a big shot in the court of Pharaoh, raised by Pharaoh's daughter for 40 years. You're thinking of Joseph. Joseph
I
was in
thought
prison.
Jethro threw him in prison, but
Jethro was his father-in-law.
that's a mean guy.
Huh?
It's a mean guy. but
Mean?
Maybe I'm mistaken.
Jethro?
Was he purified in the wilderness, that 40 years with the sheep?
Well,
that
there's an
refining?
interesting thing about Moshe. Moshe is born, say we'll start with a dot, and he was actually, the word Moshe literally is a word that means drawn out, but it's a Hebrew word meaning drawn out. But who was he named by? Pharaoh's daughter? Why would Pharaoh's daughter name this baby that was going to be her child, adopted child? Why would she name him a Hebrew word drawn out? So the question is, did she actually name him something else that we don't have his name? Or did she actually name him Moshe? Or because Moshe was writing the Torah, and all we have is the narrative many years later of whenever it was that Moshe wrote this, it's Exodus chapter 24, verse 4, that tells us Moshe wrote all the words of Yahweh. Part of this study, which we'll get into probably next time, is that, you know, when it says that Moshe wrote all the words of Yahweh, there was no writing. There was no Hebrew language. There was no Semitic alphabet. There was no alphabet for Moshe to write. There was cuneiform from Sumer, the northern kingdom up near Turkey and northern Iraq. There was Egyptian hieroglyphics, but you can't write Yahweh's words in Egyptian hieroglyphics in cuneiform. I'll tell you why later, but the fact is, how did Moshe write the Torah? There was no writing, according to the historians. We could discuss that later, next time. But the point is, why would she use a Hebrew word? Or did she? Or was that really his name? There's these mysteries about the language. But here's the point. Moshe lived for 40 years. So if you start here when you're born, Moshe, drawn out of the water, let's call this a vector. We'll just draw some little geometry here. 40 years in Egyptian court. And as being raised in the court, the house of the Pharaoh, I'm going to guess, well, according to the book of Jasher, Moshe was a general, and he actually conducted troops and had a successful military campaign, tremendous war. So he was a pretty smart guy. He had position, he had opportunity, he was capable, and he dealt with international affairs. Now I'm going to bet that if he was that kind of intelligent man who had position and favor and prestige and dealt with international things, he was probably to some degree literate. But if he was literate, that's writing. The only writings that existed were Egyptian hieroglyphics and cuneiform, which are these lines that almost kind of look like, you might say, Chinese or whatever. You know, you could. It's like, and those represented concepts. It's not phonetic script writing like in the Semitic alphabet. And if that's what he was doing, he probably knew words. He knows words, different languages, different communications. Okay, then all of a sudden, at this point, a calamity happened. He killed the guy that was tormenting the Hebrew slaves. And in the movie about the Exodus of the Ten Commandments, you see that Pharaoh got mad at him, or Ramses did, and they put chains on him, and they drag him out to the wilderness and kick him out, and now he's wandering in the desert. That's not what it says. It says he ran for it because he knew he was in trouble. So, you know, when you make a Hollywood movie versus reading the script, you get two different pictures, but try to just picture what's going on. Moshe goes, crap, I just killed somebody. And somehow Picture his mind. He was a general. He was kind of like next in line for the throne. All of his friends, all of his family, everybody had an expectation, and he was being tormented knowing that his real identity was akin with one of these Hebrew slaves, and that there's his own mother and brother, and yet he's in this, and he's going to talk about schizophrenia. He has stuff going on, but we don't read about it. But he has stuff going on in his head, and finally when he tries to stop the taskmaster from brutally beating one of his Hebrew kinsmen, he ends up killing the guy. Which he probably didn't intend on doing, but that killing was this expression of an inner struggle, an inner torment. And then he buries him, and he thinks, gosh, I think I got away with it. And then somebody said, "Are you going to kill us like you killed the Egyptians?" It's like, and now the word's out, and he knows it's just a matter of moments before he's in such serious trouble, he takes off running. And now he spends another 40 years in the desert, as this verse says, shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law Jethro. That's what these words say. Moshe existed shepherding Aleph Tav sheep. Jethro, his father-in-law, Cohen, priest of Midian. That's what these words say. So now he's spending 40 years in Egypt, another 40 years, the text says it, as a shepherd, sheep herder. Can you imagine what he must be thinking? Here you are, drawn out of the river. And then he's raised with his mother, being the wet nurse, as it were, right, for a while, a couple years maybe, or whatever. So he gets this identity of this Hebrew slaves, and he hears, to the extent that he thinks that his rule, his job, his role in life is to save his people. But now he's in the desert for 40 years as an exile. Don't you think that that's got to wear on his head? 40 years doing this, and all of a sudden, ripped apart. Now he's 40 years doing this, and he's going, what am I doing? Who am I? Am I an idiot? Am I a lunatic? Was it a deception? Am I insane? It's like, what? The interesting thing is, this word roeh, which is translated shepherd, also means thinking, broken, crushed, in distress, and striving. That kind of describes everything that he must have been thinking about these 40 years and these 40 years. Now, I'm surmising this. I am imagining this as if I was reading, say, watching a movie or trying to do some character development. Who is this man Moshe, and what must he be thinking and doing? So now I'm trying to take the words of the text and read into them and step into another world. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm going beyond just Moshe exists, shepherd, sheep, this word's never translated, Jethro, father-in-law, priest, Midian. I'm trying to get in Moshe's head based on what these words tell us. He's drawn out and then kicked out. He's walking along and somehow he's thinking, striving about some kind of distresses. Who am I? Why am I here? Should I have done something different? Can I repent again more? What? All this stuff. And then this word sheep also means export, go out, ejected, treat as filth, abominate. And the word aleph nun is where, why. So it's fair for me to think that Moshe was thinking, I'm in exile. I'm in exile, kicked out with a price on my head. You know, those old wanted posters of the West, wanted dead or alive. That's Moshe. And right after this, a few verses later, Exodus chapter 4, the voice speaking to him said, hey, the people that sought your life have all died. Oh, that's why it took 40 years. He didn't know that. He didn't know what's going on. But everything's been, like the menorah branches, amad, placed, standing, like the trees, like the flowers. Yahweh's got it all in control. He's setting something up. Just like placing each letter in a proper order. Which this is where we have to place our hope. Our trust is to say, He's got it. Because as the deist thinks, Thomas Jefferson, for example, hey, He built the world and then hands off, He's just watching. Ooh, look what they're doing. I told him. Too bad for them. And every once in a while He'll drop something in, kind of like what the Hunger Games movie is about. That's a pretty close example of the deist point of view. Is that true? Maybe so. If you read in the Song of Moshe, Exodus 30 or Deuteronomy 32, 34, Yahweh wants to be intervening with our life, but He says, because of the way you guys are behaving, that's it. I'm walking away. I wonder if they'll notice that I'm not there. And it looks just like the deist model. So maybe the deist model is true. How do we re-engage, Bob? How do we get Yahweh to pull back into Mem, the chaos, where Sheen, He will be the El Shaddai, blowing out our enemies and providing all of the things we need? Manifest! How do we get that to happen? That's another way to read the word from Moshe. Deuteronomy 30. Turn back to His Torah, choose life, turn back to His Torah with all our heart and soul, and do what He said. In the place, time and space, the fourth day when He put sun, moon, and stars in the sky lines up with the menorah, the samach, and it speaks of time and place. Grow where you're planted and bear His fruit, illuminated the light, bearing the fruit of Galatians 5:22. That's how everything changes. In which case He's no longer the deist God, but He's the Yahweh Eloheinu, our powerful champion, our Ayil IT. Just a little interlude here. A fellow the other day was wearing a sweatshirt and it said Italia. Italia. He said somebody had been to Italy. If you read it in English, Italia. So I looked at that and all of a sudden my mind flipped it around and I was reading it Hebraically. Aleph, Yod, Lamed, Aleph, Tav, Yod. Well, Ayil is a ram, a stag, a chief, a leader, the strong of its kind, like a champion and a hero. And Eti is the word that's translated as either me or could be my hero. Italia, Aliati. For Yahweh to go from being the deist who's out of touch and won't intervene. Why? Because we turned away from His Torah and had a bad attitude and wouldn't do what He said. Boom, right there. That's the answer to the whole thing. We didn't choose life. We chose the pirate skull and crossbones of loving death. We have to change our heart, change what we hear, change our attitude, change our behavior, look out for one another, and open our mouth. And then, Zadi, sprout, resurrection. That's the changing of the world that nobody in science, nobody in politics, nobody in any other religion wants this to happen, because that's a scepter of rule. And Yahweh said, if we, Israel, His people, do not turn to His words with a pure heart and do what He said, He will let them rule over us. And they will lose that scepter that they have been temporarily given when we turn to these things with a pure heart. I keep saying pure heart because at the pay it lines up with the beatitude, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see Elohim. And Elohim is not just God, it's the power. The power, Ha Elohim, the manifest Yahweh being our champion. And when we speak words, we see it happen. So Yeshua said, say to this mountain, be moved, and it'll be moved and cast into the sea. As you speak, as you declare from your heart. And if you have a corrupt heart and you speak, corruption's going to happen. It says in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, be careful not to allow just anybody to lay hands on you, because it's a transference of whatever garbage is in them. If you have the pure heart, as Sally was expressing last night, with this as a radiant light bulb of clean, pure energy flowing through you, see, we're not the source, we're the vehicle conduits. The vehicle, you hop in the vehicle and it takes you. Electricity goes into the filament and it glows. We are just the branches. It's His Ruach. If we are filled with His Ruach in its purest form, which is the Hebrew alphabet, that's what produces the fruit. And if we are the conduit of His Aleph, then as we think, as we regard with tender affection, like a woman nurturing the embryo within her, her child, His Torah, then the manifestation will be, Yeshua said, everything we saw Him doing, we will do, and even greater. He did not walk on the water and raise the dead and produce fish and bread because He was God. That's not why that happened. It happened because He was Ish Israel, Ish Ivri, a Hebrew man who was holding in his heart with warm affection the words of his father and doing what he saw his father doing. And he says, everything you see me doing, you will do, and even more so. And if we don't see it, it's because we're not at that place that he was describing, that he was manifesting, modeling. And if we do that, the same way he was thrown into the tomb at the Het, and 1, 2, 3 days and 3 nights later he sprouted to life in the resurrection, I believe that this is a model that if Israel, who has been cast aside, scattered amongst the nations, will sprout back to life. And it's not the nation state of Israel over there in the land at the moment. It's the confederated 12 tribes coming back to the Torah. It's not some... well, I won't even mention the word. It's not necessarily the political banking power that's over there. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's not necessarily. I'm just saying. The sprouting of the scepter, Yeshua, Pezadi, he opened his mouth and he taught them. Matthew 6, the Beatitude. The Yahudim, as far as I understand, have no access to those words because they're told stay away from the New Testament, don't read them. And so how can they hear the Pezadi, the open mouth of Mashiach, Yeshua, telling us how this kingdom works? It's nothing different than the Torah, so they still have the words, but they don't have the insight of the modeling that Yeshua gave us. The point is, if this that was hidden, mem, like in a womb, what comes out is this devouring fire, this potential on evidence. That's Deuteronomy 30. And there's a friend of mine was putting together a list. There's like 100 scriptures, 100 passages that talk about this that we've never heard. It's not taught in the church. The point is, what exists when Moshe was thinking why he was ejected, Yithro, no, that's the name of his father-in-law. The word Yithro means he will search it. He will, prefix letter, it, or his. Vav and tar means search or explore. It's not just the guy's name. It's he will search it out. But it's also, yatar is the word for hypotenuse. Well, what's a hypotenuse? If you have a right triangle, 90 degrees, the hypotenuse is the line connecting opposite the angle. So the phantom, the missing, the hypotenuse that Moshe was searching for is the connection between 40 years in Egypt and 40 years in the desert. Now I'm making this up. I'm imagining, because of these words, and the word hetav is the word hidden. Yeah, it means father-in-law, but it also has to do with a oneness. His is that suffix, our is that suffix. What's our connection? Father-in-law, son-in-law, that's our connection. But it also is, what's the connection that he was looking for, having been kicked out of Egypt and being out here 40 years? He's searching for the hypotenuse, the connecting, the phantom, the hidden hypotenuse. The word Cohen, Kaf Hey, is the word for yes. Hey Noon or Hey Noon Hey, which Hey is a suffix of the Hey Noon, so it doesn't change the Hey Noon, is the word Hannah, which means gladly, and yes, so it's like, oh yeah, here it is. He found it. How did Moshe find it? Mem is the one who or the place of. Din is where you get the word like judge. Din, Dan. Determine. Decide. The one who draws the line. Va, ya, nahag. Nahag means drive, conduct, establishes a custom, led, or guided. It's to make something and lead and conduct the way of Hey Gimel, Hag. If you look at Hey Gimel, Hey, it means navigate phonetics. Rudder, helm, steering wheel, phonetics, thinking, pondering, spelling words. That's what that word means. Establish as a custom, drive, conduct, lead, guide by navigating the phonetics of spelling words. And according to the historians, there were no words spelled in the Semitic language of Hebrew, the Canaanites speaking at that time. But I can read this and going, wow, this is what Moshe was led to do. And this word zan is that same word as sheep, but it also means to go forward as a pioneer. And this is the word future. He's pioneering the future by the spelling of words. And this word midbar, which is wilderness, the word debar is actually the word for speech or word, and mem is to put it into a noun form. Put the words into an object form. Well, that's the Samic carrying the message, the consciousness of noon, which is what the words mean. This looks to me like Moshe was given the comprehension to design the Semitic alphabet. They were already speaking the words, but somehow to take the consciousness of what the words were and analyze the whole thing down into the 22 letters in a certain order, which only Yahweh, the Hebrew language, it's so deep, so incredibly, also numerical value, that's a whole other thing. And could Moshe possibly have done that? If Moshe was shown the Aleph of Sheen and put it into the Samic of Nun, because this was what the language is all about. Import or cause to arrive, cause to happen. Aleph Lamed is El, Kar is the mountain, but it also means to make evident or pregnant. It's the summit or the pinnacle. This means motion towards, this is it. This is everything. As we were talking, it's like there is no study, there is no understanding, there is no greater awareness in the universe than to realize that each one of these 22 letters in Hebrew is Elohim on display, is the identity of Yahusha being the very Hamashiach that the world has been looking for. It is the formula of sanity and of power that the physicists have been looking for, that all the religious leaders and sages and gurus have been looking for. And it's right here, hidden in these letters. There's verses that talk about where Yahweh hid himself. And if you look at that, you'll realize that if you look at the Hebrew letters, it shows you that he hid himself in the language of Ivrit. That's the power. And then this word Horeb is actually Het Resh Bet, which is sword, waste, ruin, desolate, dry, drought. There's a verse that says, there will be this day when people will be so famished and hungry. There's been such a drought, not of water, not of food, but of hearing the words of Elohim, hearing the truth. The word Het is a fence. It's to be locked up and hidden. Resh Bet is the word Rav. This is Ravah, and it means outstanding, multiplied, greatest, most important. So the same word that we could read as sword, waste, or ruin, or just simply the title of the name of the mountain, Horeb, also means, I choose to read it this way, the greatest, outstanding, multiplied, beyond words, how incredible this is, has been locked up into a waste of desolation. And it will be revealed, now we'll read the words backward, the revealing of this most powerful, which is the pinnacle, and the word for pregnant also is the word Hebrew. these words and letters are pregnant in the speech, pioneering the future by phonetics, a place of jurisdiction. Restoring Israel. How do you restore the 12 tribes of Israel that were lost? How do they get their power back? Go back to the language. It's pioneering the future. It's what will make the future now. Oh, the future as he promised. He said he'd bring his people back. The same way that Moshe pulled his people out of Egypt and brought them into the wandering the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. It didn't have to be 40 years. That's because they rebelled with a rotten attitude. Didn't do what he said. Wouldn't regard his instructions. Yeah! Imagine if you're in Egypt for a couple hundred years. I mean, I said it was 430 years, the day of Exodus, from when Abraham had been told. But they weren't slaves in Egypt for 430 years. They were wandering around in Canaan without a land of their own, but they were only slaves for maybe 100 years plus. But the point is, that's another story. The point is, they were out of the land and became Egyptianized. How do you take Egyptian culture, religion, thinking, education, behavior, take somebody out, slave mentality, what I mean by behavior, and turn them into the people of Yahweh? Change the language. Change the custom. The 7 Moedim are wrapped up in the letters Chet through Zadi. Yom HaShabbat, the Sabbath day, letter Zion, letter Zadi, that which restores back to life. Stop. Sit. Change the culture, create the nation. That's what Midian means. Cohen. Gladly, yes, here it is. Finally, we found it. The secret code, the treasure map, the key to the universe. Our oneness is hidden in the way we think about who Yahweh is. It's right in the language. That's why we should read the language. That's why we should learn Hebrew. That's Exodus 3:1. I think it's incredible. Anyway, does anybody else have anything else to say or ask or put into this?
Thank you.
The one thing I was thinking when you said, why was his name Moses? And it means water, right?
It means to be drawn
It
out.
means to be
But the
drawn
letter
out,
Mem is water.
Drawn out.
Sheen is fire.
And Pharaoh's daughter saw him in the water and sent for him to come out. Or sent someone in after him to get him for her.
Right, so
They
that
took him out of the water.
the action of his life was
The
embedded
action,
in his
yeah,
name.
the action. So did she name him that?
Well, actually, sorry, you came in a
Yeah.
little late. We
Yeah.
addressed that earlier.
Okay.
But so the question is, it's a Hebrew word, but it maybe was an Egyptian word as well. And
Okay.
who knows? Let me just throw one other little thing, as long as you mention this, just for what it's worth. There's one story in the New Testament where a genuine demon is actually named. Yeshua, when his disciples were walking along the
Legion,
shore.
wasn't
Excuse me?
it? Was it Legion?
Yeah, Yeshua and his disciples were walking on the shore, and they came across near a graveyard, and there was a guy that was just raging, just manic, just out of his mind. And he came down, and he was going through, and he was so tremendous that they tried to bind him with chains, and he would break the chains, and he'd just rip them apart. Like Samson. I mean, this guy was just in a frenzy, some sort of Goliath. And Yeshua said, "What's the name of this demon within him?" And he said, "Well, my name is Legion." Legion. And then he said, "For we are many." For we are many. And so then Yeshua kicked him out. Now, here's the question. We're reading this in English, but it came out of Latin, which came out of Greek, which came out of Hebrew or Aramaic. Which language is that? Doesn't matter, but I'm just saying, what language is that demon's name? Is it English? Is it Latin? Is it Greek? Or is it Hebrew? Or Aramaic?
All of them?
Huh?
All of them?
All of them. How can you have the same name in 4 or 5 languages? How does that work?
Because we are many,
Who are many? The demons?
the demons.
But what does that have to do with language? The question is, what language is that written in? Why would the demons identify themselves in 4 languages all at once? English didn't even exist.
Maybe, well, at that time, I guess you're right on that. It didn't exist. Maybe it was Hebrew. I mean, maybe Aramaic or Hebrew at the time.
How would you know one way or the other?
The demons are nothing but fallen angels.
Yes.
And
We know that there are times when Satan actually goes to Elohim and actually gets permission to do things.
Book of Job, okay.
So the real query is, what language is Hasatan speaking to Elohim in?
That would be Hebrew. Because that,
Why? How do you know that Hasatan speaks to Elohim in Hebrew?
Because that's the pure language of the Father. I mean,
Well, do we know what language they're actually speaking up in the heavenly realm? I mean, on the earth, he gave us Hebrew, we're saying, but
maybe this is just a thought. Since Hasatan or Satan is a fallen angel, he was Yah's right-hand man at one point, according to the prophets. I forget which one, but according to the prophets, he was over certain things in the heavenly realm.
well, that's debatable. We can talk about that later, but go ahead.
But later he started out with pride, and then he got cast out of heaven because he tried to take over y'all's throne.
Well, what does that got to do with the language?
It's just the way I'm gonna bring this out. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe because since he was one of Yah's right-hand men, he knows Paleo Hebrew. He knows how the language of Yah. I mean, maybe it was Hebrew at its purest form. I mean,
He's also a creation
yeah, and
of Elohim,
yes.
Well,
and likely imparted with the knowledge of the Father's plan.
okay, except the problem with that is that it says somewhere in the New Testament, I think with Paul's writings, that, boy, gee, if the powers of evil or if the devil had known Yahweh's plan, he would have never crucified Yeshua. Well, if the plan is written in the alphabet, and if he knew the alphabet, it says right there, the Vav man is going to be Zion and thrown into the tomb, and then he's going to sprout back to life, resurrected Zadi, and ascend Kuf. What's there not to know? How could he not know that? Unless even this interpretation was hidden from his understanding. I'm just saying, these are all things we can debate. We got to come to the end of this here, but let me show you something in this word. Just looking at the dictionary. English, legion means many, okay? The Roman legions were a whole cohort, a few thousand soldiers, okay? Legions, so that's English. It comes from the Greek word logo, which means word. It comes from the Latin word legere, which actually means to bind by the leg. As in legally, legal. As in legislation. Legislate. You make up laws to bind people. The word leg comes from the Hebrew word lamed gimel, lag, which is some type of a measure, liquid measure, where we get log, maybe, or lager, L-A-G-R-E, which is a liquid measure like drinking a type of beer. It's called a lager. Anyway, as in Isaac Moseson's study, where you could take the letters and flip them, and that's what happened, you get RLG, or Resh Gimel Lamed, Regal, is the word for foot, or leg. So you change the LG back and forth, GL, and you get the festivals that you walk out, but it's also custom, habit, and tradition. This is the word in Daniel chapter 2, where Nebuchadnezzar saw this statue given as a vision from on high, head of gold, arms of silver, midsection bronze, legs, regal of iron, and feet, also regal, mixed with iron and clay. The stone hits the feet, topples the statue, and then the stone becomes, the stone becomes a mountain, a har, that will not yield its sovereignty to another, and that's the last kingdom on earth. Is it the last kingdom on earth, or is it the new kingdom after the earth is destroyed and the Messiah comes? That's what is being taught in the Christian church that I'm familiar with. So the last kingdom, according to them, is the legs of iron mixed with clay, and then when that's destroyed, then the new kingdom will come, which is the eternal kingdom. It's like, that's not what it says. What it says is the stone hits the feet, topples it over, it disintegrates, the wind blows it away, it won't be found, and that stone becomes a mountain that won't yield its sovereignty to another. That's the last kingdom on the face of the earth. I believe, Aleph Bet Nun, stone, Abba, his will and desire, Bet Nun, son. Bet Nun is the word for Bet Nun Hey is construction. Bet Yod Nun is being, is to think and consider, and the word for son, S-O-N. So as a good Ben, as a son of the Father, doing, thinking, pondering, meditating, and doing the Father's will, building it. So Yeshua said, I only do what I see the Father doing, I only say what I hear him saying, and the voice came from heaven, this is my beloved Son, listen to him, do what he says. That's Eben. And when Israel, his favored son, Ephraim is just a delightful child, or my heart goes fonder and fonder, Jeremiah 31. When Israel, the 10 tribes, the 12 tribes, does the Father's will, with the heart, as he said, that's the stone that hits the feet, the legal words legislated to bind us by the legs, not letting us walk out the festivals. These are known as the Regalim festivals, are Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, are Shavuot, and Sukkot. Those are known as the Regalim festivals. For 2,000 years, since Constantine and the Roman Empire, the legs of iron have kept us, making it illegal under threat of torture and death, that we cannot regard these festivals. But yet if we walk out these festivals, then Yeshua, the Word, set that guy free and brought him back to sanity. And the word for language, the Hebrew tongue, is Shafah, HaKodesh. The sacred tongue, and that word tongue, Shafah, means to restore to health, to set free, become sane. The Hebrew language will break the bonds of the legislated insanity of the many words of law, superimposed upon us, that Yahweh has allowed because we would not regard the words of the Torah. We consider them vile, a stench, loathsome, abhorrent. Deuteronomy 30. What part of his words do we find so reprehensible? And yet, 2,000 years of people, humans, that would have loved Yahweh's things, have been taught and trained to reject his words and bristle at the thought of regarding his instructions. When we turn to him with a soft heart, allowing his Ruach to blow through us and bear the fruit of gentleness, kindness, meekness, temperance, self-control, courage, truth, kindness, emet and hesed. That's the coming of his kingdom. His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And here we are, this day, like the Nun Samach lifted up with wings of fire. That's what I think this is. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're talking about this. To restore the kingdom. To give Abba his desire, his heart's desire, that he's been waiting for 6,000 years.
Hallelujah.
Shalom. Hallelujah.
Shalom.